Welcome to today's conversation. My name's Lindsay Young. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the president of Three Aspens Media. We help businesses, primarily in wholesale distribution markets, tell their stories and share their expertise. Just a little bit of housekeeping to start for those of you listening live. You can have your video on if you want, but if you keep your audio off, keep yourself on mute to reduce interruptions, that would be great. But of course, we still want to hear from you. So if you have questions, please put those in the chat down below. I'll either ask them as we get them if they're relevant to what we're talking about at the time, or we'll leave time for Q&A at the end. For those listening on our podcast, Attract, Engage, Grow, or if you're watching us on YouTube, thank you so much for tuning in. Let's just dive right into it. There's often a gap between the information your customers need and what many distributors typically provide on their websites. That means you may be missing out on opportunities you didn't know you had. So, a big part of that equation is product data. Each distributor has large collections of diverse product types, each with its own complex sets of product details, and you need a plan to manage that at scale with the customer in mind. That is not an easy thing to do. So enter Jason Hone. Hi, Jason. He has more than 25 years of experience working with and merchandising a broad range of industrial products. And with his years of experience collaborating with distributors and manufacturers of all sizes, he's worked with companies at all levels of digital maturity, and he's here to help us tackle this topic today. Jason, welcome.
It is a pleasure to be here, Lindsay. You know how passionate I am on this topic. You know how important it is to the people who are joining us here today. So, hey, let's jump into it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So at Three Aspens, whoops, sorry, I just had to let someone else in. At Three Aspens, Jason, as you know, we focus a lot on blog posts, case studies, ebooks, other types of content to support the customer journey from the top of the funnel to the bottom. One thing we don't do a lot of, and in part that's because it's quite complex, is the product content part of that journey. Whether or not a distributor has e-commerce functionality, of course, product content is critical, but it also doesn't get the attention it deserves. So let's just set a baseline here for today's conversation. Let's define product contents to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Great. Yeah. So, because this topic will throw conversations for a loop sometimes.
Right.
So, at its fundamental basics, content is just something that says something about something
Well,
that
right.
you sell,
Yes.
right?
I mean,
Now, if you just think of it that way, that does not help define it very much. So when I'm working with companies, I think of there as being two kinds of content in the world. There is content that is called discovery content, and that's the content that helps to get you or your customers from a homepage to a product detail page. Like how do I find that thing that I'm looking for? There's the content involved in that process. And once I find a product, which may not be the product, but once I find a product, there's additional content that I want to consume in order to convince myself that this product, this candidate product, that it is going to be the thing that solves the problem that I went there to begin with. And thinking about content as all right, how do we break this down from that something that says something about something into something a little bit more structured around discovery content and all of the best practices around that versus what I call conversion content, the content that tells the story and makes the arguments. It sometimes helps to frame, and hopefully will frame this conversation in a way that makes it approachable.
thank you. So, how did you get into this topic, Jason? Where did your passion for product data come from?
Yes, unlike a lot of people on this call, I did not grow up playing industrial distributor in my parents' garage as a young child. It actually came to me pretty late. One of my first jobs out of undergrad was, working for that little yellow catalog over there in the corner,
Yes.
Master Car, and And it's funny because that's where I got schooled in the importance of making a really high quality customer experience and how important it was to use product data to create it. Like it was funny because when I got into the industry, like that was the culture is this make really high quality product data and use that to create these at the time, back in the 20th century, these print catalog presentations that customers would find convincing. And, having worked there at the time that they were transitioning from print only or print predominantly into this very unique, very differentiated digital experience where they've still hyper focused on those customers who maybe don't necessarily maybe know what their problem is more than they know what the solution is. Um, they've been able to lean heavily on this set of product data that meets kind of all of the standards for quality and continue to maintain their differentiation of their experience. So it's a that has always stuck with me. And when I left McMaster to go to Amazon, which was the complete opposite experience, we tried for a few years to make content as important, but it just doesn't. It's hard to make it scale when you're dealing with multiple millions and billions of SKUs. So I had this sort of teeter totter experience with product data, where on the McMaster side, very, very high quality, but it requires a lot of effort. To the Amazon philosophy, which is just get a bunch of SKU data up there. Just put it, the good stuff will float to the top, the bad stuff, people will learn. Um, and so I got this sort of yin and yang experience around content, and that really formulated a lot of the foundations of how I view content, and also why I think it can be the biggest differentiator now that companies are trying to transition more into online. Because if it's no longer enough to just have a website, right? You have to actually have a good website now for people
What?
to care. I know, I know.
Wow, it's so demanding. Well,
Those
okay, so
customers.
speaking of what's, you talk about how, it used to be the kind of holy grail to always focus and prioritize on the quality content that you put into your catalog, but something is missing online for many distributors. So, what is the core problem that most distributors are facing when they're trying to do the same thing, move that quality data onto their website? Why is it so hard?
Yeah. So distributors have it particularly hard, right? I mean, let's be manufacturers. Hey, good for you guys. You guys have a slog. I mean, it's not easy to maintain catalogs of product data across tens of thousands or thousands of SKUs. Um, but distributors have a unique problem in that they are consolidators. So they are bringing in product data
Mhm.
from oftentimes more than one supplier. While there are some distributors are exclusive carriers of one brand. More often than not, there is a diversity of suppliers that they work with, whether for reasons of risk management or because they want to have a complete service offering, a complete product offering for their customers. So they have this challenge in that there is no universal standard and there is no universal translator for product terminology, jargon, and data in this industry. So just because I happen to sell abrasives doesn't necessarily mean, even though I may buy, grinding wheels from 3M, I might be grinding wheels from Norton, might be buying them from uh, a number of suppliers, and they all have their own unique way of formatting product data in their internal systems, and those differences come from terminology, they come from branding, um, and still a lot of times they come from the legacy ERP systems, which is the seedy underbelly of B2B e-commerce. There are, you know, billions of petabytes out there of old legacy product data that was never intended for human consumption,
Oh,
but is still floating out there in the ether. And if I'm a distributor, one of the things that I want to try to do to make a good experience for my customers is to standardize that terminology. My salespeople will do that when they're on the phone with you or when they're visiting a customer at their location. They'll talk about uh, they'll talk about uh, in coatings on cutting tools. They'll talk about or they'll talk about titanium nitride. Like it just depends on the conversation. They're able to flex it, and they've got all their jumbled data is in their heads, but they're able to translate it for their customers through conversation. But online, there is no filter unless the distributor creates it and applies it. And that is the area that most distributors struggle because there's so much data, there's so much inconsistency, there's so much of it that's missing or unclear. And that can create a lot of work for a manufacturer who's trying to do it with, 25,000 SKUs. It's another thing when you're a distributor and you've got 250,000, 500,000, a million SKUs from all these different suppliers. The thought of trying to do that is just overwhelming.
gosh. So one of the things that you're fond of saying, Jason, is that even though this is so hard, of course, um, distributors still need to make an effort and create a plan to differentiate with that product content. So not only is there a baseline of content that you need on your website, you also need to differentiate with that content. Can you talk about what it means to differentiate with product content online?
Sure. I think it's exactly the same philosophy that distributors are thinking about when they're planning for training of their in-person sales force, right? The
Ah,
reason that people are going to call your salespeople is because they know that this salesperson, when they come to visit them, when they have a conversation with them, is going to be able to explain uh, everything that that customer needs to know about this product in a way that applies to their business. So, and that kind of information doesn't happen overnight, right? Like you don't hire a new sales associate onto your inside sales desk at the age of 21 and have them be a complete master of all of the feeds and speeds associated with cutting tools or requirements around compatibility in an industrial automation environment. That just doesn't happen.
no.
So what you do is you don't try to you may not well you can try, but it's going to be harder to try to train a new salesperson on literally everything in your catalog all at once, right? So you pick here's a brand, here's a line, here's a category of product that I know is really important for my business. And I'm going to send that salesperson to some special training around that. So in a digital world, what we used to do back in the day when it came to product data is the first thing that you have to do uh, when you're becoming a content focused organization is you have to kind of set the standard for what is good data, right? And so we would go and we would create a data model. We would create here's your category list, here's every single category in your product line, and then here's every single attribute for that product, and here's the ones you're going to use for faceted search, and here's the ones you're just going to display, and here's all the valid values. It was this. It's a product data rule book, and that is incredibly helpful. That is what you use as an organization to share with maybe you're going to hire a consulting firm to come in or a BPO firm to help or a third party to come in and help you create good product data, right? If you don't have something that you can give to them that says, hey, we're selling uh, we're selling pillow block bearings. Here's the information that you need to create a good experience around pillow block bearings. They're not gonna. They're just gonna go and grab whatever they can find.
Yeah.
The difficult thing is not necessarily to create the model, to establish what is good. Where these projects slow to a slog and eventually fail is in applying that to the half a million SKUs, right? And where we would say, all right, hey, we're going to go and we're going to build you all these SKUs now, and it's going to, run, I don't know, $10 a SKU, and sure, when I was consulting, we would go and say, oh yes, we've got this data model is done, and now we can send you on a path to success. $10 a SKU, that'll be $10 million, please. And if any of you are working for a distributor that can quickly write a check for $10 million for product data, please give me a call. I'd love to work with you. But I suspect that most organizations are challenged by that. So the difference now is that it's really important, once you have this data model finished, to figure out how do you tilt the scales a little bit, and how do you break down your entire product catalog into tranches based on how important is that product line to your business. And there's two reasons for this. One is from a cost management perspective, right? You don't necessarily want to go out and build perfect product data on every single SKU that you carry. If you're spending, $10 to build wonderful, flawless product content and product data on a SKU that never gets any traffic, there's probably better places to put that money. By the same token, if you have, like, if there's a SKU that's in your best selling product category, right, where going out and spending $50 on that SKU to get, yes, to meet the standards of the data model, but then to, like, write some romance copy, maybe shoot an instructional video, maybe have, shoot, instead of just having the standard image from the supplier, maybe you go out and shoot your own image. Maybe you have a a local photographer that you work with, and you have them come in and shoot not just the primary, but like two or three different angles, and you lay out a style guide for, this is how we're going to create and shoot images for these kinds of products so that they're consistent across everything in our category. And what you find is, you make these investments, you start to make them in a more targeted way, based on how important is this product line, is this category to my overall business. And by leaning more heavily and by directing more of an investment in the categories that matter, you can get the ROI on those investments, where they not only start paying for themselves, but they can start paying for some of the work down the line into, the products that still matter, but may not be like, the 5% of your selection that drives 25% of your revenue. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And that was my question, is what percent does that land on? Like that top tier that you're going to be enhancing and
Yeah.
differentiate.
So I break it into I break it into, I think, about five different tranches. So I break it down into, so you've got your priorities products, right? These are like the top 5% of the categories that, where, like, this is the stuff that if you didn't sell this stuff, you would not be a successful business. And that might be, the top 5% of the categories that drive 5% of your revenue. The next tranche is kind of the 80-20 rule, right? That's the 20% of your selection that drives 80% of your business. Still really important. You're going to want to go to a little bit extra there. But it may not, you're not going to do like instructional videos. You're not going to create customized CAD files. You're not going to go out and, um, create that 10th accessory image that shows the product in use. But you might have like two or three images in your 80-20 tranche.
Right.
The next tranche after that is your managed SKUs. So these are the catalog, these are the products that you've decided, I I care about these products. I'm going to give them a part number in my system. They're going to live there. I'm going to have a price assigned to them. I may even have some of them in inventory. Um, but they generally aren't really driving my business. So those are the ones that you are going to say, these just need to meet the bare minimum of my data model. They need to be categorized right. They need to have the attributes that I'm using for faceted search need to be populated, and they need to be normalized. But I'm not going to go any farther than that. Beyond that is what I call the long tail. To most distributors, that's the stuff that is available that they could buy from their manufacturers that right now they have chosen not to because the costs of bringing that into the managed selection are just not, they're too high relative to the fact they sell them so rarely that it just doesn't make any sense. So what I think is happening that is interesting is like, all right, so if you're gonna, instead of trying to build across all three of the ones you manage, your priority, your 80/20, and your managed selection, is when you lean in on the priority and the 80/20, you can start making more money to improve the experience online. And with a better experience, you can start to, and more automation, you can start to bring more of the selection from the long tail into the managed portion. And that's how we can kind of incrementally get closer to that. Remember, remember I don't know, like 15 years ago when the term endless aisle was getting thrown around all the
Yes.
time. And we were
Yes.
like, well, this is the great thing about e-commerce. It'll let us build catalogs in the millions and everything's gonna be great.
And everybody
But the
can buy
problem is that
everything.
you'll
Yes.
be able to buy everything. This is what Amazon business was originally designed to be, was this place where you could buy anything. And the truth is, you can buy anything on some of these sites. The problem is you can't find it. So so being able to take this approach of let's stratify our selection and be really mindful and strategic about how we are investing in content across each of these tranches, that's how distributors can take a more measured and strategic and data driven approach to their product data to start to create that differentiation.
So basically, how do you eat the elephant? You don't need to do it all. It's
Yeah.
a horrible metaphor, but you don't need to do it all at once. You can just start with just one bite at a time, right?
Right. Don't eat the whole tree. Just reach up and take the lowest hanging apple and just eat that.
Yeah,
Like,
that's a little less grotesque. I like that better.
well, it's
One
I'm
apple
not
is
the writer here.
awesome. Kind of jumping back just a step, Jason. The cost. Let's talk a little bit about why this is so important before we dive more into kind of some tips on how to think through this. Um, how do you think this problem, not taking a measured approach, not actually taking an approach at all in some cases, is limiting distributors? What's the cost of not throwing themselves at this challenge?
So we have already seen there's a shift happening in business, and it's primarily being driven, I think, by a generational shift. Um,
Wow.
you know, when I was, a long time ago, I used to say that uh, people have been able to order, like, so when you look at the new buyers
Mhm.
today that are start like an associate buyer gets hired by a company and they're brought into purchasing. They've been able to buy everything they've ever needed in their whole life on Amazon since before they were born.
Yeah.
Like, they've never known an environment in which something that they wanted, they weren't able to find it online quickly and, relatively easily. Now, to some extent, that's because what they've been buying are consumer goods, and consumer goods generally tend to not be so technical, so they're a little easier, right? This is why the B2C companies are so much farther down the road of digital. Is they've cheated. Their products are fairly simple generally to find and to buy, and they're not quite usually as application specific as things like, butterfly valves or pumps or linear actuators. Um, the expectations are still there. Like the expectation of a buyer when they're going online about them being able to find what they're looking for and then be confident that this thing that I'm looking at is going to solve my problem. Those are very high. And the reality is that without good content, your ability to create a story that can handle both of those steps, that can get that buyer from your homepage to a product page, and then provide a convincing amount of information that not only does this product do what they need it to do, but that you know enough about this product to be a trusted source that they will want to buy it from, especially if you're trying to get to use e-commerce as a business development channel, as a way to get new customers. It's not enough to just be an order pad where I log in, I type in, here's the manufacturer part number, boom, fine, add to cart. Like that. Congratulations, you've added a user interface onto EDI. Good for you. But that is not going to be how the next generation of buyers are going to be evaluating potential sources.
Mm.
And so that I think is something that not a lot of distributors really think about is, if a new buyer came to my website, would I look like I knew what I was doing?
So important. Right.
Yeah.
Well, and kind of building on that, Jason, when we're saying a new buyer, and correct me if I'm wrong, someone's evaluating product on a distributor's website, it doesn't necessarily mean that they want to buy that actuator or whatever on your website. They could be evaluating that in the shopping process with the full intent of calling the distributor or reaching out to a sales rep to discuss or consult further, right? So this is not just for someone who wants to add it to cart. This is also part of the overall shopping experience that purchase could be made in person. So that's this is also important for that, correct?
Absolutely. It is shocking when you look at the data out there talking to Gen Z buyers. I mean, millennials aren't kids anymore. I'm tired of people saying that, like, oh, millennials, these darn kids and their rock and roll music these days. Um, it's millennials were already not big fans of picking up the phone and calling people. I belong to the last generation of people who will call people in the dark
If I
without
have
warning.
to. Yes, if I have to.
Yeah. Um, but you're talking about like part of the challenge about these generations is their degree of digital sophistication and their digital self-confidence, right? They think that they know how to use a website,
Mhm.
and it's because their standards have been set in the B2C world. So that makes it hard for us as distributors to create a digital experience that meets those requirements because what we sell is more complicated, because what we sell is more atypical, because what we sell is oftentimes very application specific. Well, we're not going to go and change Gen Z and convince them, oh, yeah, you know what, Grandpa, you're right. I should pick up a phone or I should wait for Al to come and take me golfing. I'm sorry. That ship has sailed.
Yes.
And it's not to say that salespeople don't add value. They absolutely do. But the kind of value that you want your salespeople doing, the sort of highly consultative, highly problem solving, hey, let's sit down here and look at this tool in a spindle and let's see how it's running and let's listen for chatter and let's like all of that sort of nuanced assistance, that true expertise, there is still absolutely a need for that you cannot extract no matter how many customer reviews I put on a website. But the power of digital is that in those first few steps of your experience, when I go to your homepage, does it look like you know what you're doing? If I type in a very industry specific jargon term for something I'm interested in, do you even recognize what I'm talking about?
Mhm.
If I go to your website and I look for a dingleberry hone, do you know that I mean a ball hone or a flex hone? Or are you just going to like give up your hands and be like, I don't even know what that is? Um, you're being judged by the experience that your website creates. And it is not only that, well, technology's hard and, we actually know this stuff. Like they're not going to give you the benefit of the doubt anymore. You have to create an experience that convinces your users, both your existing customers and your new potential ones, that you are competent.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I know she is not currently in procurement, but my 7-year-old already defaults to the internet, right? Like
Yeah,
look it up on Google. That's
right.
when that's immediately. Yeah, you just buy that on Amazon, mom?
Yeah.
Order it. That's her default. And she's obviously more of a digital native than even the Gen Z are, but like it's just it's mind blowing how natural this is to, you know.
Well, and it's interesting that there's a lot of talk right now about the power of how marketplaces, right, are coming in and disrupting distribution, right? But so this is actually an area where content can help distributors because you have control over the experience that you create on your site to a much greater degree than a marketplace site will have over theirs. Like they are on the Amazon side in the world of the McMaster Amazon teeter totter. Marketplaces, by definition, generally prioritized ingestion of new SKUs and more and more and more and more. But the fact of the matter is, they usually cannot clean up and create a good, knowledgeable uh, product discovery experience, product user experience in the way that a distributor like a McMaster Car can. So your ability to compete against the marketplaces may be helped by taking a content first approach in this sort of tiered manner, and leveraging the fact that you know what these products do better than anybody who's running any marketplace out there, that's kind of live and open right now, certainly better than Amazon does. That's something I think not enough distributors take advantage of.
Absolutely. So kind of diving further into that comment, you've kind of already outlined, starting with thinking about these tranches, right? The top 5%. Could you go a little deeper into talking about, other like after you've done that, then where do
Mhm.
you go? What are your next steps?
So there's different it's a two-axis problem, right?
Sure.
So on the one hand, you obviously have to start with the content that means the most to discovery, with that discovery content. You gotta lean in heavily to your product taxonomy, your category list. Make it easy to find for customers to browse. You have to lean heavily into the attributes that are driving faceted search, right? What do customers want to filter by? I want to filter by material. I want to filter by size. I want to filter by brand. I want to filter by maximum pressure. Whatever performance uh, traits these customers are looking for in order to solve their problem, got to help them with that first. If you skip too far ahead and you're working on things like, oh, I want to write custom copy for this SKU,
Ah,
because this was a mistake that I took away when I was at Amazon. We had built this process to build custom product copy for detail pages. But what and so we were going out there like spending like a good investment in building this custom content and building copy, and we built our own photo studio. Some of the most beautiful pictures of end mills that you will ever see, Lindsay, are on the Amazon business site.
wow.
Look up the
I'm
ones
gonna
from
have to
Niagara
check that
Cutter.
out after this.
They are we actually printed some of them up and had them hanging on the walls as art in the department.
Amazing.
They're beautiful, beautiful. But here's the problem: if we couldn't get a customer to that detail page where they even see it, Well, then that was just a waste of money.
Mhm.
And we didn't have enough invested in making sure the faceted search was complete and that those values were normalized and that they were consistent. We didn't have enough product categories even to create an adequate differentiation, even in picking which attributes we were going to use for faceted search. So there was all these keywords, like search keywords, that we hadn't built into the system yet. So we were solving conversion content problems when we really needed to be focusing on discovery content. So you have that, um, and then so even before you start digging into later tranches, like just focus on those key critical discovery content solutions, and then it's just a matter of doing experimentation, right? Do I go over? Do I start investing in the conversion content on the priority,
Mm.
or do I go and do the discovery content on the 80/20? And that's where I like to do samples. I like to do A B testing. I like to say, like, hey, let's pick a category or two in 80/20, and let's do the taxonomy and attribution work there and get those values meeting the 4 C's of product content, right? They're got to make them clear, complete, consistent, and correct. Or do we extend and do more of the conversion content for the priority? And that's, I mean, I there is no one direct path to rule them all. It depends on the category of products. It depends on the kinds of customers you have. It depends on the kinds of users that you're trying to work with. Um, but it is a grid. It is a matrix of trying to move from this corner of priority discovery content into towards that the last corner of this matrix, which is your long tail, um, uh, the long tail conversion content and secondary content and sort of educational content, like the user videos and stuff. Yeah, you may never get to there. And frankly, I think if you are a distributor and you are doing so well in e-commerce, that you're really worried about educational content on long tail selection, please again give me a call. I would love and work for you because uh, you're doing very very well.
Well, that was I was going to ask quick follow up here. I mean, that is not we're not talking about a process that you can start in January and be done in June, right? We're talking about an ongoing process of prioritizing and updating product content throughout your site. And then maybe we can jump into the data governance definition and conversation, then it's also while doing that, continually making sure that all that other data stays up to date, is clean, correct, complete. What's your other word? Consistent,
Consistent.
right?
Yep.
So it's a journey, right? You're not really gonna get off that train like ever. Is that right?
Here's what
Is
I
that too dramatic?
no no no. So here's what I like to say. This is a big mistake that companies in this space make is they think of e-commerce as, oh, we've got an e-commerce project going on right now. We're going to launch the site in Q4. We're going to be ready for it. And the reality is that in this business, as in any business, frankly, e-commerce is not a project. It's a program. It is something that is like you should no longer view e-commerce as a project than you view customer service as a project.
Or sales reps?
Or sales reps as a project. Well,
They're not a
some
project.
sales reps are projects, but we won't get into that. The truth of the matter is that, like every operational process within your company, whether it's order picking, whether it's packing, whether it's your sales reps, whether it's invoicing and billing, you are constantly honing your edge. You are constantly looking for where can we improve, where can we tweak, where can we adjust, where can we cut costs, where can we improve productivity. You should absolutely take that same mindset into digital. It is e-commerce and digital is no different from any other process within your company. And so you do need to be thinking about, like, yes, I'm going to go out and I'm going to use this matrix approach. I'm going to focus on my priority products. I'm going to get my discovery content to a certain extent. I'm going to get my conversion content to a certain level of achievement, and then I'm done. Because the reality is, to your point, Lindsay, unfortunately, as a distributor, you don't own nor do you control the product data from your suppliers.
Mhm.
Product data is a living thing. You're going to have suppliers discontinue products and offer some sort of new and improved version. You're going to have suppliers who decide, oh, you know what? Shoot, we measured that wrong. That actually isn't 18 inches, it's actually 16 inches. You're going to have suppliers who suddenly, realize that the cut sheet that they sent you uh, last week with NMSDS is now been replaced with a new and improved version because they had to talk about some new application.
Right.
Every single piece of information that you have in your system, in this new, wonderful, improved data asset that you have built, it can change. And so it's not just a matter of going through and making the initial cleanup. You also have to have processes in place to ensure that the data that is in your system right now stays compliant with this data model that you have built. These rules for what defines whether or not product data in this category for this kind of product is still good, still meets the four C's, still is helping us to create a user experience for our customers that is so easy to use, that is so helpful, that adds so much value across all of our customers that it's gonna keep new customers from it's gonna keep new customers coming, and it's gonna keep old customers from leaving because they're like, oh man, this is getting really hard. I wonder if there's some other place out there that's better at this than my supplier.
Absolutely. So that sounds like a lot of work that you can't just ask the IT guy to manage part-time.
Please
So
don't.
please don't. So
We have
two-part
enough to worry
question,
about.
Jason. Do you hire someone to do this in-house or how do you resource this? And two, there are folks like yourself, you have a business acumen B2B, which I forgot to mention at the start of this conversation, where you work with distributors and manufacturers on
So
product
yeah,
data. There's software vendors that have systems that can support this process. There's, nonprofits that support this process. So first part of the question is, do you hire someone to manage this, or how do you attack that internally? And then the second part of the question is, how do you evaluate outside help in this? Because there's a lot of people that can claim to do this well, but a lot of times it can
oh,
fall very, very flat. So I know big
yeah,
question, but probably useful for people to hear your take on that.
so yeah, so let's talk about hiring. Um, so the hard part, hiring is the easy part. What is the hard part is getting rid of people after you've hired them, because what you find is that between technology and process, you maybe don't need as many people as you thought you would.
No.
So when I advise companies, what I suggest is, there are consulting firms out there, there are agencies that can help you put together a good data model. Right? Just knowing the product isn't going to be enough to make sure that the model that you build is going to hold up over time. I talk about the data model like it's the foundation of your house, right? If I'm building a new house from scratch, the last thing that I want to talk about is the structural integrity of the foundation that we're about to pour. I want to talk about things like paint colors and plumbing fixtures and toilets and furniture. And so sometimes distributors who are trying to go into this will charge straight into, oh, let's design a website. Let's make a wireframe. No, 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 no. No, you start by working with the best concrete contractor you can, to build a data model foundation that is going to hold up over time. So that if you decide to extend into new product categories, right? It's like if I actually build a new house and I engineer a foundation that can only support the house that I have designed to build, then when I decide to add that second story, or when I decide to put that waterbed in, or when I decide to do anything, like if I risk cracking my foundation because the foundation wasn't built for it, I have to tear the whole house down and start all over. That can get very expensive. You are much better off to work with somebody upfront to design that data model. And then the nice thing is a lot of those companies now offer managed services. And it doesn't need to be forever, but I'm saying that most distributors don't know what a good data governance program looks like. So it's important that you contract with somebody that you really know and trust and that has the capacity to do the work that needs to be done. And then I strongly encourage customers to work with somebody like that for, a year to for hey, if they're able to like prove, if you're working with a really good consultant, they should be able to come to you and say, like, hey, here's how we're making you money. Here's how we're proving our value. Here's the value that we're adding to your process. Especially if you're like a mid-sized distributor, you can just decide it might be easier to work with somebody to do the data governance going forward. Because the thing is, and we haven't even talked about this yet, Lindsay, is eventually it goes from data governance to data execution. It's how do we use this product data to deploy true merchandising and marketing capabilities online to really kind of raise my digital game online. That's a whole other conference call we can have. Uh, but but um, but the key is like, all right, what are we doing that's helping us understand this? Give yourself at least a year, maybe two, and if they can prove their value, like maybe forever, before you say, all right, now we know enough about how to run this process. We know enough about this process that we can run it just like order picking, just like delivery, just like customer service, just like accounts receivable. You should, if you don't know enough about that department, trying to hire one for yourself and have a lot of risk. So be mindful.
You don't know what you don't know at this point. Yeah.
Humor there be dragons, Lindsay.
But we don't have any outside questions, but I have one more thing for you, and I'm kind of throwing this at you out of nowhere. So we'll see, and it's going to be a very general question. It's going to be a question probably a lot of people are thinking about: is there or have you seen yet a role for AI in this process? I had to ask it.
Oh, such a loaded question.
Yes, it is.
Um, so let's talk about it in the two contexts. Let's talk about AI in the context of discovery content. Okay. So um where so there are a lot of people who are talking about the advantages of using LLMs and AI to populate attribute values. Hey, we can go out and just ask ChatGPT, hey, what's the cutting diameter of a Sandvik Cora Mill 880 part number SOSI ones, right? Whatever. And it will spit out a number. And you're like, well, that's great. I didn't even have to call and bother the Sandvik salespeople. But here's the problem is that when you go to a source of product data that is outside of the supplier uh, distributor indemnification coverage,
Right.
you are inserting some risk in there. I mean, it's one thing if it's, you're asking about the palm size diameter of a, food service glove. It's another thing if you're asking for the maximum load capacity of a fall arrest harness. Uh, we sell things that people can get hurt. And so anybody who's coming and talking to you about using AI to fill those gaps, just make sure you're asking them that question and make sure you're having conversations with your suppliers about the impact that process might have on indemnification coverage. Now, that being said, AI, I think, can be very useful when you are working on conversion content, like romance copy, like helping to create the first draft of a block of copy. That is then going to get looked at by a proofreader to make sure that all the claims that are made and the features that are described are actually accurate. Can save a lot of time. And as you work down into the 80/20, the managed, the long tail tranches, um, I think it I cannot say that I would not consider experimentation with it. I think the upside is still too great um, to not experiment with it, but I would never take something AI generated and put it right in front of a customer without somebody taking a look at it. And I bet you your product liability lawyers would want the same thing.
Amen to that. Yes. I have seen far too many hallucinations on what should have been a very basic output on ChatGPT to trust it to put
ChatGPT is still the law of averages. It doesn't really know anything.
no.
It's good at pretending, though.
It is good at pretending. It sounds like it knows what it's talking about.
You gotta love its confidence, right? Like, oh man, if I was as confident as ChatGPT at all times, wow, man, I would have been a great salesperson.
You could take over the world, Jason.
Who says I'm
I
not?
huh?
Who says I'm not?
Oh, oh, all right. Well, on that note, a big round of questions. Jason has some world taking over to get back to. Jason, thank you for joining me. This has been a really great conversation. I knew we could not solve the problem of product content today, but I feel like we gave it a good shot. We covered a lot of really important topics. Um, so thank you again for joining us. Again, Jason's with Acumenal B2B. That's his business that focuses around the questions that we talked about today. You also just started a job as
Yeah,
associate director for Salesforce for Object Edge. So
I did. I did. So I get to broaden my horizons and figure out all kinds of new and exciting ways.
absolutely. So
Problems.
if you're not
Super
connected
fun.
with Jason on LinkedIn, you can find him that way. Thanks again, Jason. And thanks everybody for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Lindsay. Take care.
Thanks.